When people think of the state of Qin, they often imagine a powerful, ruthless, and highly aggressive kingdom. It conquered Hangzhou Wei Chu Yan, and Qi swept across the warring states, and finally under Qin Shi Huang, created the first unified empire in Chinese history. But Qin was not powerful from the beginning. For a long time, the Qin people were only a small group living on the western frontier, compared with states like Qi, Jinlu and Yan, which were recognized by the Zhou royal court much earlier. Qin had a very low starting point. At first, it was not even a formal feudal state. So here is the real question. How did a small frontier people eventually become the power that unified all of China? Was Qin Shi Huang's success truly his alone? Or was it the result of centuries of effort by Qin rulers before him? In this episode, we begin with one of the most important figures in Qin's early history. His name was Duke Xiang of Qin. To understand why Duke Xiang mattered, we need to go back much earlier. Qin Shi Huang completed the conquest of the 6 states between 230 and 221 BC. In other words, the final unification took roughly 10 years. But for Qin to reach that point, the state had been preparing for nearly 600 years. Before Qin Shi Huang, Qin had already gone through more than 30 rulers. This means Qin Shi Huang stood at the moment of final victory. But behind him was a long history of expansion, survival patience, and accumulated power. The early street rise of Qin was connected to one man. His name was Feizi. Feizi was not a king, and he was not a ruler of a major state. He was best known for one skill: raising horses. During the reign of King Jiao of Zhou, Feizi served the Zhou royal house by breeding horses. Because he did this well, King Jiao rewarded him with a place called Qin, allowing him to establish a small domain there. This was a very important step. From this point on, the Qin people were no longer just an ordinary frontier clan. They had gained a recognized political position within the Zhou system. However, their status was still not very high. At that time, Qin was not yet a full feudal state. It was more like a lower-ranking territory under the authority of the Zhou royal court. In other words, the Qin people had received a ticket into the political order of the Zhou dynasty, but they had not yet taken a seat among the major states. The person who truly elevated Qin's status was Duke Xiang of Qin. When Duke Xiang appeared on the historical stage, the Zhou royal house was already in decline. In the early Western Zhou period, the authority of the Zhou king was extremely strong. The king granted lands to the nobles, and the nobles defended the royal house. The entire world was organized under a strict political hierarchy. But by the late Western Zhou period, this order began to weaken. One major reason was that the Zhou royal house itself had fallen into crisis. During the reign of King Li of Zhou, tensions between the royal court and the people became intense. King Li tried to control economic interests and also suppressed criticism of his rule. A minister once warned him that blocking the mouths of the people was even more dangerous than blocking a river. This became one of the most famous political warnings in Chinese history. Unfortunately, King Li did not listen. In the end, a popular uprising broke out. King Li was forced to flee the capital, and the prestige of the Zhou king suffered a serious blow. Later, during the reign of King Zhuan of Zhou, the dynasty experienced a short recovery. But in the later years of his reign, repeated military failures weakened the royal house even further. The final collapse of the Western Zhou came during the reign of King Yu of Zhou. King Yu is one of the most famous kings in this period of Chinese history. He is remembered because of the story known as 来听法把百生 Tracy. According to the traditional account, King Yu was deeply fond of a woman named Bao Si. Bao Si rarely smiled. So King Yu tried to make her laugh by lighting the emergency beacon fires and tricking the nobles into rushing to the capital. When the nobles arrived with their armies, they discovered that there was no enemy at all. It was only a joke. Bao Si laughed and King Yu was pleased. But the problem was that beacon fires were not toys. They were an emergency warning system used only when the state was in real danger. The first time the king lied, the nobles came. The second time, they might still come. But after being tricked again and again, they stopped believing him. So when aerial crisis finally arrived, and the beacon fires were lit again, many nobles refused to respond. Later, the Marquis of Shan joined the forces with Western tribal groups and attacked Haojing, the capital of Western Zhou. This time, King Yu was truly in danger, and he lit the beacon fires for help. But this time, many of the nobles did not come. The capital was captured, King Yu was killed, and the Western Zhou dynasty came to an end. This disaster changed the fate of the Zhou dynasty. It also changed the fate of Qin. After King Yu's death, his son Kingpin of Zhou took the throne. But Haojing was no longer safe, so Kingpin moved the capital east to Luoyi. This event is known as the Eastern Migration of Kingpin. From this point on, the Western Zhou ended, and the Eastern Zhou began. During this time of chaos, one man made a crucial decision. That man was Duke Xiang of Qin. When the Zhou royal house was in danger, many nobles chose to wait and watch. Some were unwilling to send troops at all. But Duke Xiang came with his army. At first glance, this looked like a simple military rescue, but behind it was avery, sharp political calculation. Duke Xiang understood that if Qin wanted to rise, it could not rely only on developing in the western frontier. In the political order of that time, recognition from the Zhou king still mattered greatly. Whoever received legitimacy from the Zhou king had a stronger claim to power. So when the royal house was at its weakest, Duke Xiang chose to stand with it. This was loyalty, but it was also an investment. It was an act of rescue, but it was also a chance to seize history. And as it turned out, Duke Xiang made the right bets. After Kingpin moved east, he rewarded Duke Xiang generously. The reward had two major parts. First, Kingpin officially made Duke Xiang a feudal lord. This meant that Qin was no longer just a small frontier territory. From this moment on, Qin became an officially recognized state under the Zhou order. Qin finally gained the political status to stand alongside states such as Qi, Jinlu, and Yan. This is what we mean when we say Duke Xiang founded the state of Qin. Second, Kingpin granted Qin the lands west of Mount Qi. This was a large region and would become extremely important for Qin's future growth. But there was one problem. Although Kingpin granted these lands to Qin, the Zhou royal house did not actually control all of them at the time. Much of the area was occupied by Western tribal groups. In other words, what Kingpin gave Qin was not land that Qin could immediately use. It was more like a legal claim. You can think of it as the Zhou king giving Qin a property certificate. The house now belonged to Qin in name, but someone else was still living inside it. If Qin wanted to truly own it, Qin had to fight for it. At first, this reward may sound empty, but in reality, it was extremely important. From that moment on, when Qin expanded westward and fought the Western tribes, it had political legitimacy. The Qin people were no longer simply expanding by force, they were reclaiming land that the Zhou king had officially granted to them. That is the power of legitimacy. However, although Duke Xiang gained the official title, he did not fully secure the territory. Later he died while fighting against the Western tribes. The actual control of the land was not completed during his lifetime, But Duke Xiang's historical importance does not lie in how powerful he made Qin immediately. His importance lies in the fact that he opened a door for Qin. He transformed Qin from a frontier clan into a recognized feudal state. For the first time, Qin had a formal state identity. He also gave future Qin rulers a legal foundation and a strategic direction for expansion. So we can say that Duke Xiang completed the first major step in Qin's rise. He gave Qin its name and status, but the land population and real power behind that name would have to be won by another important ruler. That ruler was Duke Mu of Qin. Duke Mu was one of the most important rulers in the history of Qin. During his reign, Qin truly began to expand westward. Eventually, Qin became the dominant power among the Western tribes. One key figure in this story was a man named Yu Yu. Yu Yu was originally from the state of Jin, but later he went to the Western tribes and became trusted by their ruler. When Duke Mu heard that Yu was a man of great talent, he wanted to bring him over to Qin. When Yu Yu visited Qin, Duke Mu deliberately showed him Qin's palaces and treasures, hoping to impress him with Qin's wealth and power. But after seeing them, Yu Yu did not praise Qin. Instead, he pointed out that building such palaces could exhaust the people and waste state resources. Duke Mu immediately realized that this man was extraordinary. If someone like Yu Yu remained with the Western tribes, he would become a serious threat to Qin. So Duke Mu used a strategy. On the one hand, he delayed Yu Yu's return. On the other hand, he sent beautiful singers and dances to the tribal ruler, encouraging him to sink into pleasure and ignore government affairs. When Yu Yu finally returned, he found that the ruler no longer listened to his advice. In the end, Yu Yu left the Western tribes and joined Duke Mu of Qin. After gaining Yu Yu, Duke Mu gained a much deeper understanding of the Western tribes. Later, Qin launched the military campaigns against them, absorbed many smaller tribal states, expanded its territory, and finally became the hegemon of the West. At this point, the property certificate that Duke Xiang had received finally became real land in Qin's hands. So we can understand it this way. Duke Xiang gave Qin legitimacy. Duke Mu gave Qin real strength. One founded the state, the other expanded it. One opened the door, the other walked through it. From Duke Xiang to Duke Mu, Qin completed a critical transformation. It was no longer just a small frontier territory under the shadow of the Zhou royal house. It was becoming a major power in the West. More importantly, Qin's geographic position also began to change. It controlled the Guangzhang region, with the west behind it and the central plains in front of it. Once the western threat was gradually contained, Qin's future goal would naturally become eastward expansion. But expanding east was not easy, because standing in Qin's way was one of the strongest states of the time, Jin. Jin was powerful, and its location was critical. If Qin wanted to enter the central plains, it had to face Jin. So even though Qin became dominant in the west during Duke Mu's reign, the real challenge had only just begun. Could Qin break through Jin's resistance? Would Duke Mu's plan to expand eastward succeed or fail? We will continue that story in the next episode. Before we end this episode, let's summarize. The rise of Qin did not happen suddenly. Qin Shi Huang's unification of China was not a miracle that appeared out of nowhere. Before him, Qin had already gone through centuries of struggle and accumulation. Feizi raised horses for the Zhou royal house and received Qin's first domain. Duke Xiang rescued the Zhou king and gained official recognition for Qin as a feudal state. Duke Mu expanded westward and gave Qin real military and territorial strength. Qin Shi Huang stood at the center of the final stage. But that stage had been built by generations of Qin rulers over hundreds of years. and the founding of Qin under Duke Xiang was one of the most important starting points on that long road.